Hi, my name is Caroline, and I would like to welcome you to my podcast, One Opinion from Europe. Today, we will be taking a look at ICE as compared to the Gestapo. When I watch podcasts from the US, I often hear, I wonder what Europe is thinking about us. So today, here, you can have my opinion of how I view the situation and how I compare ICE to the Gestapo. Now, my mother, she grew up in Nazi Germany, so my family has some background on this, and she would tell me some stories which I thought would never repeat again. But unfortunately, we are seeing those again today in the United States of America. I will be looking at similarities between ICE and the Gestapo, and then I would like to take a look at a few differences, but they are important differences. I would also like to take a quick look at the detention centers springing up around the US. And then finally, I will wrap it up and give you my opinion. Now, my opinion is just one opinion here in Europe, but I do feel it is quite a mainstream opinion. Now, let's start by taking a look at the similarities between ICE and the Gestapo. Now, ICE is generally viewed as a Trump militia, and the Gestapo, which was then called in those days the Geheime Staatspolizei, was also a militia turned towards the population of Germany. Both are mechanisms of state power, and both disappear people. Now, my mother, she went to school in Nazi Germany, and she would say she would arrive in the morning and realize that children were missing. Of course, they had the excuse that they didn't know what was happening, and they obviously were hoping that these were children who had managed to flee the country and that their friends had not been caught by the Gestapo and taken away. But people did vanish just from one day to the next. So that is also similar to what is happening in the towns where ICE is parading as a state militia. The other thing which is quite similar is that ICE uses administrative warrants. Now, these are not judicial, do not go through courts, and basically have no standing as far as the legal process is concerned. Also, this was a system used by the Gestapo. It was an extrajudicial power. So there were no judges, no warrants were issued, and basically the Gestapo could do what it deemed was right. And another thing which is very similar is that ICE, thanks to the Kavanaugh ruling, basically works on racial profiling. So depending on your skin color or upon what sort of job you do, how well you speak English, they can sweep you up off the street or out of your home as they please and think fit. Now, the Gestapo also operated under a very similar system called the Schutzhaft or protective custody. They just made arrests of anyone who they deemed to be a threat. So these are similarities which both ICE and the Gestapo have. Now let's take a look at the differences between ICE and the Gestapo. From their origins, they both started slightly differently. ICE originally was created in response to the 9/11 national security crisis as a US immigration and customs enforcement, and it had the backing of the people, and it was only as it developed over the Obama, the Trump, and then the Biden administrations, that Trump, now in his second administration, has created this feel of a state militia. Whereas the Gestapo originally started as a Nazified existing police structure. It consisted of career detectives and lawyers, and it was a relatively small group of people. They basically relied on denunciation from the German population. I remember my mother telling me that it was very dangerous to talk to your neighbors about anything about politics or even within the family. People were looking to find privileges for themselves or for their families from Nazi Germany, and they were willing to tell the Gestapo about things they may have heard from their neighbors. They would not even talk to their children about these things because people were worried about what they would actually be telling at school. Now, it took a lot of courage to speak up in Nazi Germany, and often it would be or result in a silent death. Now, in contrast, we see that in the USA, there is quite a resistance to ICE. When we look at the horrors of how ICE has been acting out on Minneapolis streets, we see large protests. And one major difference, which was not available in Nazi Germany, is this here. We have our cell phones, and it has been publicly communicated to the people to record anything they see, how ICE is reacting. Now, if this would be Nazi Germany and something like the René Good situation or the Alex Pretty situations, these executions of just normal citizens, even American citizens, they would have to rely on what the officials, so in this case, Noam, J.D. Vance, even Donald Trump himself, have been talking about these people and how they died. Now, the recordings made by the people show a completely different story. And obviously, that is a story which just goes to show how out of control the ICE situation is. Also, thanks to the internet, people can organize. They can look after their neighbors. They can go and take them food. They can take the children to school. They can take their neighbors to work. So this is a completely different spirit than the one that was encountered by the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. Today, when one person films an injustice, millions of others instantly stand behind them. Now let's take a look at the detention centers. These are often called modern concentration camps. The word concentration does apply to both systems. The detention centers in America these days are used as a form to detain and concentrate migrants. But as we know today, these are not just migrants that are in there, they are also American citizens. Now, the Gestapo-led concentration camps of the Holocaust were indeed different. They originally started out in about the early 1930s as detainment camps for political adversaries such as communists or socialists, and they were brutal. But people did come out on average after 44 days. Now then, in 1938, this evolved. After the Kristallnacht, at least 30,000 Jewish men were put into the concentration camps, specifically for labor. These people were used in the German industries, obviously the weapons and arms industries. So that went on for a few years, up until about 1941 during the war, when the real evil function of the concentration camps changed to mass extinction centers. People were put to death en masse. They were gassed in concentration camps such as Treblinka, Belzec. Dachau was one that actually evolved right from the beginning. It started out as a political detention center, but then obviously towards the end of the war was also involved in mass extinction of people. Now, that is luckily today a significant difference. People do die in the ICE detention centers, we know, but that is mainly due to lack of medical attention. Lack of medical attention also applied obviously to the Holocaust concentration camps. In fact, the people were used for medical experiments. Also, starvation is a major issue in the Holocaust. People died of starvation. And you can take a look at ICE. Many of the reports do come out saying that the food supply in the ICE detention centers is definitely not of a high standard. In fact, it is often infested. The water is not drinkable, and people feel that they are getting sick because they do not have potable water. The sanitation systems in the ICE detention camps are often very lacking. I heard one report where women were being given what you would call diapers. We call them nappies here in Europe, which is such a degradation of human rights, I feel is dreadful. Anyway, the legal status of these two different systems. Now, the ICE detention centers are funded by the US state, but they are funded to generate for profit income streams for Trump's oligarchy buddies. So they form part of the grift. And as we know, the big ugly bill poured billions into this system. Now, the German Holocaust concentration camps were a true state-run system. Obviously, there was no legal status for the German concentration camps. Once you were in, you were in, and there was no way you were probably going to get out alive. And in the ICE detention centers, okay, they may have been formed on a civil legal basis, but we know that the access to lawyers, the access to habeas corpus court judgments is very lacking. People are months and months. I heard of one family today with 2 5-year-old children who'd been in a detention center for 8 months. So that is also obviously not a general state-run legal basis for detaining people. Now, I would like to wrap up this episode by giving you my opinion of the situation with ICE in the United States of America. We see today that we have a partial shutdown due to the funding of the DHS. The Democrats have demanded a whole wish list of things needed to be agreed upon by the Republicans before they are willing to continue with funding of the DHS. Things like no more masks, the agents have to wear body cams, any searches of homes have to be according to the Fourth Amendment. Now, I have a problem with this list. The administration has not shown a willingness to comply with laws. And even if an agent, for example, is wearing a body cam, even if it's running, who is to say that these films will be handed over to any investigation and to be used to find out what has really happened when a situation occurs? I feel that ICE needs to be abolished, and the immigration function, which is definitely an important one, can be done by a department of police. For example, here in Germany, we do have a border police, but they are definitely not masks. They do wear guns, but I have never been stopped by them. I regularly go across the German border. They look in all the cars as you drive past, but I have never been stopped. And they are basically looking for illegal immigrants. And it is very clear what is happening. And this is the way that ICE has developed. Where are the oath keepers? Where are the Proud Boys? Are these the thugs that we see on the streets as performing as ICE agents? I think it needs to be abolished and restarted completely as a different function within a different department. Luckily, we do see that ICE is not completely comparable to the Gestapo. Due to technology these days, there are certain restrictions and certain findings on ICE which are stopping them doing their worst. However, how will ICE develop? We saw that the Gestapo basically developed over time. And we have heard people like Steve Bannon saying that ICE may be used to patrol polling stations. Now, of course, this would be a major intimidation of people wanting to vote. And we saw that Trump wanted to call out the military to seize voting machines during the first time he tried to steal the election. And luckily that was stopped. Now, is he setting up ICE as his paramilitary so that he can intimidate people going to the polls? This will be a development which we will have to wait and see. I also think that institutions are failing to protect the American people against ICE. SCOTUS is a very unreliable check on ICE, and the legacy media is very selective in how it reports ICE situations. It is up to independent media like podcasters who are really stepping forward and showing what ICE is about. Of course, the main check will have to be the US people. We have seen major protests. We have seen people on the street. We have seen them all out by minus 10 degrees with their cameras in their hand. And I do hope that this situation does not develop even worse as the Gestapo did. But we will have to wait and see. And I think there's still a way to go until the US can safely say that ICE has been tamed. So this is my one opinion from Europe. I hope you have enjoyed watching this and it may have given you some food for thought. So please feel free to subscribe. Probably my next episode will be about tariffs. Also, please feel free to leave comments and suggestions for anything you would like me to cover. I will be happy to start a dialogue with you and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much and bye.